Anyways, chapter 7, Judaism, the Pharisees. Going good. Judaism has been described by Moses Mendelssohn, a learned Jew, in this way. Judaism is not a religion, but a law religionized. This definition does away effectively with the erroneous belief prevalent among the non-Jews that Judaism is a religion. In spite of the loud and frequent assertions made by Jews and Christian divines alike, contending that the Jews were the first monotheists, it is a well-proven fact that the high initiates of the Memphis priesthood were monotheists long before the Jews ever went to Egypt. Judaism would be best described as a rite or compendium of rites, for if one lends belief to the existence of the Jewish lawgiver, Moses, one must bear in mind that he first studied among the high initiates of Egypt and later became the pupil and son-in-law of Black Jethro, the Ethiopian magician whom one might call the father of voodooism, name given to the magic practices and rites performed by the Negroes. The closer one studies the history of the Jews, the clearer it appears that they are neither a religious entity nor a nation. The absolute failure of Zionism, which was a desperate effort on the part of certain Jewish leaders to bind all the Jews of the world into a national entity whose territory would have been Palestine, proves the futility of such an effort. Judaism is not a religion, and the Jews are not a nation, but they are a sect with Judaism as a rite. The obligations and rules of the rite for the Jewish masses are contained in the Talmud and Shulchan Aruch, but the esoteric teachings for the higher initiates are to be found in the Kabbalah. Therein are contained the mystery rites for the evocations, the indications and keys to practices for conjuration of supernatural forces, the science of numbers, astrology, etc. The practical application of the Kabbalist knowledge is manifested in the use made of it through the ages by Jews to gain influence both in the higher spheres of the Gentile life and over the masses. Sovereigns and popes both usually had one or more Jews as astrologers and advisors, and they frequently gave Jews control over their very life by employing them as physicians. Political power was thus gained by Jews in almost every Gentile country alongside with financial power, since Jewish court bankers manipulated state funds and taxes. Through the ages also can be followed the spreading power of the sect, and no more awful example of the devastating and destructive power of the penetration of the secret subversive society has ever been witnessed. With its B'nai B'rith Supreme Council as the directing head, the sect with its members swarming among all nations has become the sovereign power ruling in the councils of all nations and governing their political, economic, religious, and educational policies. In his book, Nicholas II et les Juifs, Nekdovoldovo explains that the Chaldean science acquired by many of the Jewish priests during the captivity of Babylon gave birth to the sect of the Pharisees whose names only appear in the Holy Scriptures and in the writings of the Jewish historians after the captivity. 606 BC. The works of the celebrated scientist Monk leave no doubt on the point that the sect appeared during the period of the captivity. From then dates the Kabbalah or tradition of the Pharisees. For a long time, their precepts were only transmitted orally, but later they formed the Talmud and received their final form in the book called the Sefer HaZohar. Pharisees were, as it were, a class whose tendency was to form a kind of intellectual aristocracy among the Jews. At first, they formed a sort of brotherhood, a Habara, the members being called Habarim, or brothers. They were a subversive element aiming at the overthrow of the Sadducean high priesthood, whose members prided themselves on the aristocracy of blood and birth, to which the Pharisees opposed an aristocracy of learning. The war waged by the later extends over a long period of time, and the rivalry was bitter. The Pharisees, who, although they professed as one of their chief tenets the utmost contempt of the Amaharets, or simple people, did not overlook the fact that they needed their mass support for the attainment of their own aim, and they enlisted it by opposing the Sadducean strictness of the law in many instances, namely in the observance of the Sabbath. The power of the Sadducees fell with the destruction of the temple by Titus, and thenceforth the Pharisaic element held supremacy among the Jews. Quoting an acknowledged authority on Judaism, Mr. Flavian Brenier, Lieutenant General Nekvolodo, further describes the policy of the sect as follows. Before appearing proudly as an expression of Jewish aspirations, the tradition of the Pharisees had serious difficulties to surmount, the chief of which was the rival of the Orthodox faith stimulated in the Jewish people by the captivity. To the exiles bemoaning the fall of the Temple of Jerusalem and begging Jehovah to end the misfortunes of their homeland, the revelation that Jehovah was only a phantom entailed not only certain defeat, but also their own exposure to perils, the least of which would have been the loss of all authority over Israel. The Pharisees then, judging it wiser to capture the confidence of their compatriots by taking the lead of the religious movement, affected a scrupulous observance of the slightest prescriptions of the law, and instituted the practice of complicated rituals, simultaneously, however, cultivating the new doctrine in their secret sanctuaries. These were regular secret societies composed during the captivity of a few hundred adepts. At the time of Flavius Josephus, which was that of their greatest prosperity, they numbered only some 6,000 members. This group of intellectual pantheists was soon to acquire a directing influence over the Jewish nation. Nothing, moreover, likely to offend national sentiment ever appeared in their doctrines. However, saturated with pantheistic Chaldeanism, they might have been, the Pharisees preserved their ethnic pride intact. This religion of man divinized, which they had absorbed at Babylon, they conceived solely as applying to the profit of the Jew, the superior and predestined being. The promises of universal dominion, which the Orthodox Jew found in the law, the Pharisees did not interpret in the sense of the reign of the God of Moses over the nations, but in that of a material domination to the imposed on the universe by the Jews. Yes, let me reread that. I like that. The promise of universal dominion, which the Orthodox Jew found in the law, the Pharisees did not interpret in the sense of the reign of the God of Moses over the nations, but in that of a material domination to a imposed on the universal by the Jews. The awaited Messiah was no longer the redeemer of original sin, a spiritual victor who would lead the world. It was a temporal king, bloody with battle, who would make Israel master of the world and drag all peoples under the wheels of his chariot. The Pharisees did not ask this enslavement of the nations of a mystical Jehovah, which they continued worshiping in public, only as a concession to popular opinion, for they expected its eventual consummation to be achieved by the secular patience of Israel and the use of human means. Monstrously different from the ancient law were such principles as these, but they had nothing one could see which might have rendered unpopular those who let them filter, drop by drop, among the Jews. The admirably conceived organization of the Pharisees did not fail soon to bear fruit. One cannot better define its action in the midst of Jewish society before Jesus Christ. And Mr. Flavian Bernier then... these words are old. These are hard ones to string together for me. That's all right. We'll try it again. One cannot better define its action in the midst of Jewish society before Jesus Christ, said Mr. Flavian Brenier, than in comparing it with that of the Freemasons in modern society. A carefully restricted membership, tightly bound, imposing on their members the religion of the secret. The Pharisees pursued relentlessly their double aim, which was 1. The seizure of political power by the possession of the great political offices, the influence of which was tremendous in the reconstituted Jewish nation, and the conquest of the Sanhedrin, Jewish parliament. 2. To modify gradually the conceptions of the people in the direction of their secret doctrine. The first of these aims was achieved when Hillel, a Pharisee of Babylon who claimed Davidic descent, was elected president of the Sanhedrin. Thus ended the bitter fight between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Opposed to Hillel was Shammai, a Sadducee, supporter of the Sadducean high priest who was made chief judge of the assembly. The attitude of the two men towards each other is a matter of long record in the Talmud. Among the most noted Pharisees after Hillel are Yochanan ben Zakkai, founder of the school of Yamani, Aqaba, who, with Bar Kokhba, fomented the revolt against the Romans under Hadrian, rebellion ending with the order of the dispersion of the Jews, 132 AD, with the order for the fomented the revolt against the Romans under Hadrian, rebellion ending with the order of the dispersion of the Jews in 132 AD. Also, Simon ben Yoli, who might be termed the great magician and father of the Kabbalah. Lastly, Judah, the prince who compiled the Babylonian Talmud. Under these chiefs, the Pharisaic power was definitely established in the Sanhedrin. Those among the Jews who clung to the Sadducean tradition or refused to acknowledge the dominion of the Pharisees remained as dissidents. Such were the Samaritans and the Karaites who rejected the Talmud. The second of the aims of its method of attainment is exposed in the so-called protocols of the wise men of Zion, who loudly denounced by the descendants of those who devised the secret doctrine in Israel here meaning the Jews as a religious community, most of whom remain quite ignorant of the intricate subversive schemes imputed to them. The attitude of Jesus Christ to this sect is definitely expressed in the New Testament. See Luke 11 and John 8. Exoteric Judaism, the Jewish religion as practiced in the 20th century, is based on the Old Testament and on equally ancient commentaries on it, preserved for ages as oral traditions and known as above stated under the general name of the Talmud. All copies of this book were ordered to be burned by Philip IV the Fair, King of France, in 1306, but the book survived the Holocaust. We know that the Jewish God is not the father of all men and the ideal of love, justice, and mercy, like the Christian God or even like Amara Mazda or Brahma. On the contrary, he is the God of vengeance down to the fourth generation, just and merciful only to his own people, but foe to all other nations, denying them human rights and commanding their enslavement that Israel might appropriate their riches and rule over them. Welcome to 2024. The following quotations will serve to illustrate this point. And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor shew mercy unto them. Deuteronomy 7:2. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord of thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. Deuteronomy 7:6. The Talmud comments upon it. You are human beings, but the nations of the world are not human beings, but beasts. Baba Mecca 1146. On the house of the Goy, on the house of the Goy, non-Jews, one looks as on the fold of cattle. Ctesiphon Ebron 8. From the Talmud, a prayer said on the eve of Passover to the present day. We beg thee, O Lord, indict thy wrath on the nations not believing in thee, and not calling on thy name. Let down thy wrath on them, and inflict them with thy wrath. Drive them away thy wrath, and crush them into pieces. Take away, O Lord, all bone from them. In a moment indict all disbelievers. Destroy in a moment all foes of thy nation. Draw out with the root, disperse and ruin unworthy nations. Destroy them. Destroy them immediately in this very moment. Something Pranjaditas, Christianis, Talmudis, Judeo quotations. I don't care. I think it's all from the Talmud. When one sees inhabited houses of the Goy, one says, the Lord will destroy the house of the proud. And when one sees them destroyed, he says, the Lord God of vengeance has revealed himself. Babylonian Talmud, Barakot. All right. Those who do not own Torah and the prophets must be killed. Who has power to kill them, let him be killed. Let him kill. Hey, let me say this really, really good. I like this. This is juicy. Not juicy. This is spicy. Those who do not own Torah and the prophets must all be killed. Who has power to kill them, let him kill them openly with the sword. If not, let him use artifices till they are done away with. Makes complete sense why people don't trust that fucking book, doesn't it? You know which book I'm talking about. Not the fucking and not just the Talmud. That's a pretty easy one to fucking dismiss. The Jewish sages soon understood that Christ's way of commenting upon the old law introduced, instead of hatred towards foreign nations, brotherly feelings and equality of all men in the face of God, thus denying the Jews their privileged position as masters of the world. At the same time, Christ reforming the very primitive and rough moral ideas of the Old Testament deprived the Jews of their very covenant in the battle of life's unscrupulous double morality. Thence the Jewish hatred for the Christian faith is conspicuous in the following quotations from Talmudic sources. In the estates of the Goys are like wilderness. Who first settles in them has a right to them. The property of the Goys is like a thing without a master. If a Jew has struck his spade into the ground of the Goy, he has become the master of the whole. In order to enhance the authority of the Old Testament, equally recognized by the Christians, while simultaneously augmenting that of the Talmud and the rabbis, its commentators and authors teach, in the law, the Bible, are things more or less important, but the words of the learned of the Scripture are always important. It is more wicked to protest the words of the rabbis than of Torah. Who changes the words of the rabbis ought to die. The decisions of the Talmud are words of the living God. Jehovah himself asks the opinion of earthly rabbis when there are difficult affairs in heaven. Jehovah himself in heaven studies the Talmud, standing. He has such respect for that book. To enhance the dignity of religion's dogmas, the following commandments are given. That the Jewish nation is the only nation selected by God, while all the remaining ones are contemptible and hateful. That all property of other nations belong to the Jewish nation, which consequently is entitled to seize upon it without any scruples. That an Orthodox Jew is not bound to observe principles of morality towards people of other nations, and on the contrary, he even ought to act against morality if it were profitable for himself or for the interest of Jews in general. You people and your fucking organized religions, dude. You're all fucking gross. All of them. I don't give a shit. A Jew may rob a goy. Goy means unclean and is the disparaging name for a non-Jew. He may cheat him over a bill which should not be perceived by him, otherwise the name of God will become dishonored. Should a goy to whom a Jew owed some money die without his heirs knowing about the debt, the Jew is not bound to pay the debt. The son of Noah who would steal a fatherling ought to be put to death, but an Israelite is allowed to do injury to a goy, where it is written, "Thou shalt not do injury to thy neighbor." It is not said, "Thou shalt not do injury to the goy." A thing lost by a goy may not only be kept by the man who found it, but it is forbidden to give it back to him, who took an oath in the presence of the goys. The robbers and the custom house officer is not responsible. In order to annul marriages, oaths, and promises, a Jew must go to the rabbi, and if he is absent, he must call 3 other Jews, and they say to them that he is sorry to have done it, and they say, "Thou art allowed to." The kol nidder prayer on the day of judgment that acquits beforehand for the non-fulfillment of all kinds of oaths and vows is given here. All vows, oaths, promises, engagements, and swearing which, beginning this very day of reconciliation, we intend to vow, promise, swear, and bind ourselves to fulfill, we are sorry for already, and they shall be annulled, acquitted, annihilated, abolished, valueless, unimportant. Our vows shall be no vows, and our oaths no oaths at all. If a goy wants a Jew to stand witness against a Jew at the court of law, and the Jew could give fair evidence, he is forbidden to do it. But if a Jew wants a Jew to be a witness in a similar case against a goy, he may do it. Should a Jew inform the goyish authorities that another Jew has much money and the other will suffer a loss through it, he must give him remuneration. If there is no doubt that someone thrice betrayed the Jews or caused that their money pass to the goys, a means and wise counsel must be found to do away with him. Everyone must contribute to the expense of the community, kahal, in order to do away with the traitor. It is permitted to kill a Jewish denouncer everywhere. It is permitted to kill him before he has denounced, though it is necessary to warn him and say, "Do not denounce." But should he say, "I will denounce," he must be killed, and he who accomplishes it first will have the greater merit. How to interpret the word robbery. A goy is forbidden to steal, rob, or take women slaves, etc. from a goy or from a Jew, but he, a Jew, is not forbidden to do all this to a goy. If a goy killed a goy or a Jew, he is responsible, but if a Jew killed a goy, he is not responsible. These all read like fucking laws that kids in a playground would write, arguing with each other. Like the prefrontal cortex hasn't evolved in any of this shit. All of it. God damn. I mean, seems like Talmudic Moses fucking bullshit is really bad. You know, like it's like the coarsest example of holy shit so far. I have never read anything on Islam or anything, but this one seems to take the cake in my eyes. But wow, how far we've come as a society. The authors of the Talmud, having issued this horrible moral code that acquits all kinds of crimes in order to make easier the strife with foreigners to their own nation, understood the necessity of keeping its contents a secret and thus legislated. To communicate anything to a goy without our religious relations would be equal to the killing of all the Jews, for if the goys knew what we teach about them, they would kill us openly. No shit. Stop being assholes. Maybe you wouldn't fucking be so worried. It is forbidden to disclose the secrets of the law. He who would do it would be as guilty as if he destroyed the whole world. The restrictions and the commandments bearing this in view were raised to the dignity of dogmas of faith. It is not astonishing that in face of such prohibitions, the secrets of the Talmud have been so little known to other nations, especially to the Western ones. Until the present day, even the most progressive and citizen-like Jews think the disclosure of the principles of the Talmud a proof of the most outrageous intolerance and an attack on the Jewish religion. In order to separate the Jewish nation from all others and thus prevent it mixing with them and losing their national peculiarities, a great many precepts of the ritual and rules for everyday life, prejudices and superstitions, the remainder of the times of barbarism and obscurity have been gathered in the Talmud and consecrated as canons. The precepts observed by Eastern Jews till the present day deride even the most simple notions of culture and hygiene. For instance, they enjoin, if a Jew be called to explain any part of the rabbinic books, he only ought to give a false explanation, that he might not, by behaving differently, become an accomplice in betraying this information. Who will violate this order shall be put to death. Liber David 37. It is forbidden to disclose the secrets of the law. One should and must make false oath when the goys ask if our books contain anything against them. Then we are bound to state an oath that there is nothing like it. Every goy who studies Talmud and every Jew who helps him on it ought to die. The ears of the goys are filthy, their baths, houses, countries are filthy. A goy boy or a boy goy after 9 years and 1 day old, and a girl after 3 years and 1 day old are considered filthy. These principles afford an explanation of the action of governments in excluding Jews from judicial and military positions. They also explain that mysterious phenomenon known as anti-Semitism. In this Manual of Freemasonry, Richard Carlile makes the following observations. The disposition of the mistaken Jew is to monopolize his portion of the sacred scripture as a charm or benefit prepared and presented to his people in their sectarian character. That there was no such nation as the Israelites is a truth, found in the consideration that they are not mentioned beyond the Bible in any records whatever. Egypt knew them not, Persia knew them not, Hindostan knew them not, Scythia knew them not, Phoenicia knew them not, Greece knew them not as a nation. And in the first general notice that we have of the Jews, they are introduced to the world as a sect, or a series of sects, being Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes. And in that general notice, beyond that sort of mistaken allegorical history which Josephus has copied from the books of the Old Testament, and which is not otherwise corroborated, and no better authority than the book of the Old Testament, there is no presentation of the Jews as the descendants of a larger nation of Israelites, as a religious or philosophical sect of distinction mixed up with and found in real human history. They are not to be traced higher than the century before the Christian era. It is satisfactory to be able to show the origin of anything, for such a knowledge is a common passion and curiosity among mankind. And I think the Reverend Robert Taylor has discovered and developed the origin of the titles of Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew. Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew are Cyrenaic, Phoenician, and Egyptian terms used in the mysterious degrees. And it would be as reasonable to argue that the Freemasons are a dispersed nation as that the Jews are or were a dispersed nation. The Reverend Mr. Taylor has beautifully explained this in his discourses. The scenes and characters of the mysterious drama as found in the Eleusinian orgies of Greece were Eleusis, the advent or coming in light, the birth and character of the subject of the drama, the title of the whole play or mystery, a hierophant, the expounder of the mysteries, the high priest, the pope, the archbishop, the huparite, the minister or ordinary priest, diakonos, the deacon or lower officer, diadokochos, the torchbearer, phantomagogue, the bringer of the light, autopotos, the candidate admitted to see the sight, the visitor of the temple, the church, and chapel goer. Autopsy, the higher self. Hebrew, the initiated candidate who has passed through all the degrees of the mystery. Teleos, the adept or perfected. Israelite, God-seer, purified from all guile. Jew, the God himself, or the mysterious perfection of deification of the human character. The whole type of what may be made of human nature by cultivation of mind, which is the conditional promise of paradise or kingdom of heaven. This is the revelation of all the mysteries. So it's all fucking, it's it, dude. That's it. All this shit is just a fucking, never mind. Carlyle further states, we are prepared with historical disproofs of the existence of such a people as Israelites or Jews as a nation. They were a religious or philosophical sect who had been made adepts in the higher pagan mysteries, a sect among nations, but not a nation among sects. Judaism sanctions Gnosticism, which is further elaborated in their books of the Kabbalah. For further study on this subject, we refer the reader to chapter, looks like 14. Cool. Chapter 9 will be Orpheism and the Pagan Mysteries. That's it. Yeah. What a crazy, just, people are fucking weird, man.